Serious, people who changed the mind of conspiracy theorists. How did you do it? This is a story my dad told me before. This one person I used to know believed that you would only win money, more than $50, on a lottery ticket, if you worked for the government, or FBI. Yes, I know this sounds crazy. It did for me as well. So I bought a $30 lottery ticket and brought it up to him. I scratched it off and actually won $100. He then proceeds to believe I am somehow linked to the government. I say to him, I'm only 18. How would I be in the government? And apparently this was enough to shatter this guy's logic about lottery tickets being rigged. I'm torn on this. On the one hand, good on you for shattering faulty logic. But on the other hand, no good can come from more people seeing lottery tickets as reasonable ways to make money. This might be a boring answer because I'm not sure it fits the bill of a conspiracy theorist. Exactly. An old friend of mine started posting anti-vax stuff on Facebook and getting super into it, and a lot of my peers started unfriending her really fast. I didn't. Whenever she shared an article or study with a sensationalist tag, I would read the article in full, and I would pull quotes from it that showed the research didn't support the clickbait headline rant that had been posted with the article. I did this consistently. She eventually stopped with the anti-vax junk and her child is vaccinated now. I think there were two things that contributed to why I was able to change her mind. 1. I didn't write her off as a kook. I actually engaged in the conversation. I stuck to the facts of it instead of name calling. Engaging conversations where I asked her to defend her viewpoint and actually listened to what she had to say and didn't get angry. 2. She actually does believe in facts and science. She just fell victim to the sensationalized fear-mongering rhetoric. Dissecting the anti-vax articles helped because she was led to believe the anti-vax conclusion was based on scientific evidence. This tactic doesn't work with a lot of conspiracy theorists who have decided that conventional facts are just lies told by big whatever. So I don't know how well my methodology translates to dealing with most conspiracy theorists. I like your approach and is great when the person is responsive in that way. The psych ward got me back on my mood stabilizers. A good friend of mine started with the flat earth stuff and had a rebuttal for every shred of evidence. There are teams of people faking satellite imagery. Stars are just floating reflectors in the sky, etc etc. When I broke down the gargantuan scale of a conspiracy like that, how it would need to employ thousands and thousands of people, how nobody has ever blown a whistle about it, how we knew the earth was round through mathematics millennia ago, etc. He relented a bit. What really moved him on from it is when I asked why would they try to hide the fact the earth is round? Who profits and how? For what possible purpose would they maintain a conspiracy of that size? He couldn't come up with a why, and in that moment realized the ridiculousness of it all. By strategically out crazying them, someone was anti-vax. So, I made up a conspiracy for them to discover that it's actually a scheme by the insurance companies to nickel and dime people, because they make more money on longer living people. The classic is telling them that the anti-vax movement is actually a conspiracy by the Russians to try and weaken the Western population. My friend was your average religious nut. I have no problem with being religious, but once it starts fueling crazy beliefs, that's where I step in. Him and his dad both tried to convince me that the world was flat because God wanted it to be that way. I proceeded to show them a video of ISS members pouring water out and I forming a sphere in a zero-G environment. I explained that all liquid forms a sphere in space, and as the earth was formed from molten rock, there was no physical way that the world could be flat. My friend was shell-shocked by this, while the dad told me that the video was work of the devil. I'm glad I convinced at least one of them. One of my co-workers was super into the theory that the royal family had Diana killed. I basically took a page out of the sketch from the Mitchell and Webb look and pointed out that if the royal family really wanted Diana dead, there just had to be an easier way to plan it than rely on a high-speed car crash, no seatbelt, distracted driver, etc. I don't think I fully convinced her that the royal family didn't want Diana dead, but she definitely came around that she didn't die at their hands. Well, you can stand down everyone. That all just happened by accident. Guy at work didn't believe in the moon landings and was not convinced by the mirrors on the moon thing. I asked him if he really thought that the USSR just decided not to also monitor our spacecraft launching and going to the moon, or if our mortal enemy at the time just decided to play along for shoots and giggles. I think the fact that the USSR quit after we did it is the single most convincing thing about the moon landings. When they put Sputnik in orbit, of course the US was monitoring it and knew about it. And of course the USSR knew and monitored our moon landing. Of course we didn't land on the moon is fake. I worked with a guy about 10 years ago who didn't believe that we landed on the moon. He was kind of smug about it really. So, I pointed out how many people worked on the Apollo missions, how many would have to be in on the secret, and would be required to keep their mouths shut about deceiving the world for like 40 years. Then I mentioned how if 3 people in our office knew a secret, then in about 2 days everyone knew that secret. No giant group of people could ever keep a secret that big. That got him. It still took a few weeks, I think, for him to fully let go of the idea. There was another guy there a few years later who believed in the chemtrail thing wholeheartedly, and that the government was behind 9/11. I never could reach him though, so I guess he is still out there, probably wearing a tinfoil hat. A conspiracy that large requires the kind of discipline and competence we just don't see from people. I started to agree with them, and the idea that a brainwashed sheep agreed with the thing they thought really messed them up. Convinced an anti-vax mom that the whole vaccinations cause autism was propaganda from Russia to weaken Americans as a race so they could kill us with measles. Fighting a conspiracy theory with a conspiracy theory is risky business, but anything to get people to vaccinate their children. I don't really try to anymore. I just say you're right. Now what? And they usually don't have an answer because most of their energy is spent on trying to convince you. I just wish they'd put the fricking weed in the bag already. I was the one who had his mind changed, and it was arguing with anti-vaxxers and 9/11 conspiracy nuts that helped me realize that I was no different. Arguing with them, I realized the arguments they made were similar to the ones I had made against climate change, denying the vast scientific consensus and instead focusing on the few outliers that didn't match up, finding excuses to discount evidence that didn't fit my claims, claiming that the ones that supported the consensus were bought out or in on it, among others. Also, I don't know if my mom was starting to become a Sandy Hook hoax conspiracy theorist, but when she started to suggest that maybe it was a hoax, my stepfather stopped her and said, "Honey, no, don't even start on that. That's no different than the 9/11 truth or fuckwords." I honestly don't know what the answer is for changing a conspiracist's mind. It's been shown that when facts are presented, it oftentimes causes them cling even more tightly to their beliefs. I can speak from experience there. There was one I ran into last week who thought video games were actually brainwashing people into becoming mass shooters. All I said was take a look at all the other nations that have the same games and where they come from. Like Japan. How many mass shooters do you see there? There was a story that someone told on Reddit about how he became an atheist because when he was a kid he believed in aliens. He grew up active on the message boards. He spent hours poring over crappy pictures of spaceships trying to get details. He knew visitors came but just didn't know any of the specifics, but was very interested. He then talked about the moment he heard about phones with cameras and was so happy because now everyone would be able to take pictures of the visitors. His expectation was that because everyone has a handy camera that the number of UFO videos would increase and the quality would be better. So he went to the forums and waited for the bounty of new pictures of aliens. He waited and waited, but it never came. People were loading videos of plane crashes and rare events that were going viral on YouTube, but no UFOs. Eventually, he realized that the reason people weren't loading videos of UFOs regularly was there were none. He said the logical crushing of a key belief he had was the start of his critical thinking about his religion. It was a moment he understood that his mind was caught up in a trap. I know that doesn't answer the question, but it is my go-to example of a person who has a foundational belief in something that isn't true or delusional. It takes something that sounds far-fetched, roots you there, and then walks you out of it. If someone you know is locked into a conspiracy that is unhealthy, or if putting it's a good story to start the conversation with. A while ago when NFC was starting, I had a friend that was posting about this conspiracy. The NFC chips were really microphones that transmitted to the government. I had to tell him no, that tech was not a microphone, and that if the government wanted to spy on everyone they wouldn't use an easy to detect method, rather they would just snoop on the traffic. It was cheaper and harder to detect. They do snoop on the traffic though. I find that I can easily debunk people's misinformation when it is in one of my areas of expertise, simply because I have facts and experiences that I can share that corroborate the accurate narrative. People are emotional and experience driven. When I can share a personal story that supports the facts, they are typically convinced quite easily, so having the conspiracy theorist talk to an expert in the respective field probably has a decent chance of success. This. Very helpful, thank you. Ask what proof could I give you that would change your mind. If the answer is none or something wildly unattainable, then don't engage. If they answer with something real, then give them that. I've heard a flat earther interviewed who said he was willing to accept evidence to the contrary. Then, with each piece of evidence he basically said no, not that evidence, I mean something I agree with. In college one of my jobs was working at a radio station, and on the overnight shift worked a guy named Alan who was a flat earther. He was in butthole who would literally be on Columbus Day that we were praising part of the problem, since he believed that Columbus, he would use a slur against Italians, sailed in a fricking half circle to avoid the ice wall which he believed encircled the flat earth. I got stuck running the board one night and Alan was freaking off by playing really long album cuts so he could brag about all the beautiful women he'd had sex with, or fricked their pretty brains out of their fricking pretty ears as he put it. Bored, I looked out the window and noticed that the moon was at a quarter phase. I pointed it out to Alan and he started bragged that he'd been on a cruise to the Bahamas and had fricked a pretty senorita fricking extra hard during a total eclipse of the moon. Good, I said, because the oval shape of the Earth's shadow on the moon proves not only that the Earth is round but also a sphere. He stared at me a long time and, man, was he pee. I guess that he'd heard that proof before. He yelled that he wasn't paid to argue with freaking pansies, and went back to work. He didn't talk to me the rest of the night, and I heard that he complained about me the next day, so the program director scheduled us on different schedules from then on. He got busted that summer for beating off at a non-porno movie theater. The movie was about high school kids and had plenty of cheerleaders in it. This was my brother. Although I didn't change his mind, he did make a radical flippant viewpoint about 9/11. He as a 9/11 was an inside job theorist from soon after until well into last year. It caused a huge rift in our family as he constantly spammed us with the related videos, memes and other ramblings. No information would change his mind. I spent a year of my life studying militant Islam and its threat against the US and sent him all sort of information about them, the attacks in particular, etc. He could not be swayed. He contacted me recently almost in tears, apologizing and ashamed of how stupid he was this whole time, how embarrassed he was about the whole thing, how stupid he felt, and that he finally got it. I asked him what finally changed his view and he said it was a documentary on cable about Laura Bush. He said that how she acted, reacted, and stepped up to the plate as First Lady in the time after the attacks wasn't something that a First Lady who absolutely would have known it was an inside job would have done. If it was an inside job, Laura Bush would have definitely been the mastermind behind it. I had a co-worker believe Earth was flat and that most of what's in the sky is holograms. We've never left Earth. The whole 9 yards really. I told him when the International Space Station goes by you can talk to them on a ham radio. By realizing that it's not uncommon for people to have gaps in their knowledge, which in some cases make them look like total nutheads, acknowledge their side. We are at a conflict. Let's evaluate facts to see who is correct here. Go about it like an adult, and not immediately say Jesus Christ you're so stupid, OMG your children gonna die because you no vaccinate, or immediately attacking them. It wasn't me, but my high school astronomy teacher. Barring any scientific explanation that he had to counter any of the faked moon landing conspiracies, he had one super simple and borderline foolproof fallback for people who just wouldn't accept that they weren't faked. If there was even the slightest reason to believe America faked it, the Soviets would have jumped at the opportunity to call bulls. There was really no possible pseudo-scientific explanation to counter that one. The key is to go with the flow. For example, you aren't going to convince Karen that vaccines don't kill her children. What you do is this. Hey Karen, did you know there's a way for your kid to go to school and be unvaxxed? Okay, so the shots are sleeper agents by Big Pharma. The bandages that the kids are given activate the chemicals that turn your kid autistic. So go buy some bandages from store. But only that store. Only that store works. Then when they get their shots, say it's fine before they put on the bandages and slap it on your child. Be even freaking crazier. For those of you that haven't seen it, the Netflix documentary Behind the Curve is about essentially this. It provides the entire flat earth argument, explains why it's wrong, and goes on to explain why these people think the way they do. It's a great movie in that it makes an attempt to make these people look human, and it works. A lot of the time these people are called crazy, and being given the benefit of the doubt sometimes really helps. One of the speakers in the documentary, a scientist, explains that flat earthers are just scientists who lost their way, and calls his crowd to redeem the minds lost to these conspiracies. It's definitely worth a watch for anyone even slightly interested. I told them Australia does actually freaking exist. That was it, just me telling them. Pretty sure this guy had a crush on me because he legit said right then, well, if you think so. My roommate worked with a guy who was a conspiracy theorist. He would come home and tell me about what this guy believed. One I remember specifically was something about a machine that controls the weather in the Arctic. I asked my roommate how he could tolerate conspiracy guys' nonsense, and he said he was going to try and change his views. Over the course of several weeks, my roommate would talk to this guy on his lunch break and listen to him talk about the things he believed. Eventually, conspiracy guy started to question his line of thinking. When I asked how my roommate managed to do it, he just said he would listen intently, express an interest, then follow it up by asking how. The more this guy was forced to explain the things to someone who wasn't outright disagreeing with him or against him, made him realize how ridiculous these things were. But my roommate has since changed jobs, so I DK what conspiracy guy is up to anymore, but I hope he's moved past the conspiracy theories. Apparently he was a pretty chill dude. Calmly and friendly pluck at the strings and unravel the thing. Phrasing your arguments as questions also helps. I met a really nice dude. Suddenly he started rambling about work stealing migrants, and why he will vote for AfD, the German populist racist shithead party, not unlike conspiracy theorists. I engaged him and asked things like, but is a migrant the same as a refugee, and are those guys from AfD really concerned about TJE working man being themselves mostly rich and well educated? For many theories you can ask if it impacts the rich and powerful. Steve Jobs died of cancer and politicans need to breathe. So cancer likely is not cured and chemtrails would poison their inventors. And why would a billionaire invest so much money in spaceflight if all the scientists are wrong about the shape of the earth and what's out there? I would say gaining more knowledge about the topic you are skeptical about and be proactive in finding fact-based information are the best ways to pull yourself out of the black hole of ignorance. Make sure you are able to distinguish between opinions and facts, then ignore all non-fact-based reports. Before talking about the topic, make sure to set fair discussion rules. Theorists often start throwing out wild, unconnected claims like science doesn't know this thing or this thing to try to get your attention off of an unpleasant topic. Be fair. Allow both of you to search the internet through sources you prefer. These can and will differ. Then if possible, test these out. Many flat earthers, for example, will agree on experiments that then show the earth is round. If you then show them that interpreting the results in a way that doesn't add up, any person claiming to be rational will end up in a serious conflict with their own beliefs. I used to fall victim to conspiracy theories back in college. I think the biggest reason I grew out of all that stuff is that I was able to rebuild my self-esteem. I think conspiracy theories and misinformation really takes hold in people who have low self-esteem and feel overlooked by the world. Those theories, and the comfort of knowing the truth, gives you both the attention admiration you never had before, and the superiority complex of knowing you're right. Suddenly, your world shifts from a nobody with nothing interesting to say to somebody with an important secret that only the fellow enlightened will hear. That's a powerful draw. Luckily, I was able to meet the woman who'd later become my wife. She listened to my rantings because she thought it was funny, and slowly helped me build up my identity and self-esteem outside of all the conspiracy nonsense. Eventually, I just kinda put that stuff down because I didn't need it anymore, and educated myself on the things I had lingering questions about. 1. Don't antagonize the person. Demonstrate you are on their side and that neither you nor they are monsters. 2. Share the facts. Use facts and reason, not opinions and conjectures. 3. Get them to admit that there are multiple explanations for something mysterious. That way they are not wrong but they also can't be fanatical BC they see there are other plausible explanations. 4. Look at their feelings and life experiences and speak directly to those. A lot of times conspiracy theories are held fiercely as a form of ego defense against an experience or truth that the person finds unacceptable. For example, government is controlled by a cadre of lizards because they cannot stand to feel as disempowered as they are in a political system they find unjust. People do not want to believe that a bunch of well-meaning people as smart or smarter than they are can make a system as screwed up as ours is. If you can address the root concern behind the conspiracy theory, then you can begin the healing. Take anti-vaxxers as an example. I find them to be afraid for the health of their child. They cannot believe that they cannot protect their children from our industrial, chemical society, so they lash out and take an irrationally high ground that they can protect their children from poisons because they've identified vaccines as that poison and they can just not vaccinate their children. Ask them about what their greatest fears are for the well-being of their children. Listen to them and tell them you understand and empathize. Share with them what your greatest fear for the well-being of your children or nieces and nephews are, and then just be done. Don't swoop and say so that's why you shouldn't be an anti-vaxxer, that will just trigger them again. Just connect with them about their pain and then stop. I think it depends on the conspiracy. There are levels of facts and truths that you can show them in a calm manner, but some conspiracies just can't be solved that way. Anti-vax conspiracies are generally shot down by science and research being inconclusive or in favor of vaccinating kids. Conspiracies like Area 51 or the Kennedy assassination are harder to dispute with research. I've been to the 6th floor museum numerous times, read books, watched enough documentaries to believe that Oswald didn't act alone. He may have thought he was, but he was merely the fall guy. At least that's what I believe. One of my friends, who also has been to the 6th floor, swears up and down that he acted alone, killed him, etc. I'm a Freemason. I often run into conspirators on Reddit who think we Luciferian, or whatever. For the more common arguments, I have copy-pasta stashed away that explains the accusation, and shows how it is wrong or misconstrued. It helps that most of the time, it boils down to indirect quotes from a late 19th century hoaxer, Leo Taxel, who later repudiated his own bull's stories. Some get back to sanity after showing them that they're basing their accusations on false data. Some others are too far down the rabbit hole, or actually mentally ill. Well, not quite a conspiracy theory but a tribalistic belief nonetheless. A very long time ago, a close friend whom I love dearly decided at some point she felt abortion shouldn't be permitted at all, as that's just something that's sacred. I had a bad habit of enjoying hating on people who didn't share my beliefs at the time and loved fighting. But this was one of the few times I was endeared so much towards someone on the other side, enough to not trigger any negative feelings. So, I kind of just told her I agreed that it's life and that's sacred, but there's also some reasons why I felt it was a bit more complicated than that. Like how there's zero tolerance for it in some places already, such as in Northern Ireland. And so we can glimpse at some problems they're having, such as the story of Savita Halapanova. So now, it's not simply a yes/no black-white thing for her anymore. I think the main difference was I wasn't trying to convince her she was a freaking moron and should listen to my dictation on what to believe if she's not going to be smart enough to realize what's best. Rather, it was entirely from a place of concern and love, and definitely not wanting her to feel as if I was judging her like that for what she felt. When it's genuine, it doesn't come across as concern trolling. Show them the leaked Clinton emails. There can't be a conspiracy running everything from behind the scenes if she was so worried about losing. She should have known what was next on the agenda, lol. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.